welcome to episode 8 of Voices After Silence. We are really glad you are joining us for this one.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us.
So imagine for a second that you are one of the most famous, most celebrated architects in your entire country.
Right, like a household name.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your buildings literally define the skyline of the capital city. You're wealthy, you're highly respected, and you move in the absolute highest circles of society.
Sounds like a pretty incredible life from the outside.
It does. But for 20 years, behind all those award-winning concrete structures and the public praise, you've been harboring this secret.
A very dark, very heavy secret.
Yeah, a secret so heavy that it almost destroyed your mind. So today we are opening up a stack of sources that honestly read less like an architectural biography and more like a psychological thriller.
They really do. It's intense material.
I swore I'd leave this town. Funny how it never left me. Life looks different in a back row rear view. Things I thought I wanted, some I did, some I outgrew. Count my blessings on the center line.
We're looking at the intensely guarded autobiographical testimony of Miguel Fisac. He was a legendary Spanish architect, and we're looking at his 2 decades inside the secretive, highly structured world of Opus Dei.
And, it's an incredibly sobering, meticulously detailed set of documents we're unpacking for you today. What Fisac left behind is rare.
Very rare.
Yeah, it isn't just a diary of his personal suffering. It's a structural teardown. Because he was an architect, he looked at this institution the exact same way he would look at a building.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. He mapped out its load-bearing walls, the psychological foundations, and the mechanisms of control that held the whole thing together.
And because this material is so dense and, frankly, so emotionally charged, the way we are going to approach this exploration today is entirely unique for this show.
Right. We have a very specific structure planned for this one.
Exactly. So here is our mission. In part 1, we're going to give you a pure, uninterrupted biographical narrative. We are going to co-tell Miguel Fisac's chronological story.
Starting from the very moment he was recruited.
Through his harrowing escape across the Pyrenees during the war, his eventual break from the organization, and the truly chilling aftermath of that departure.
And we are not going to pause for modern analysis or thematic comparisons in this first half.
Nope. We are just going to immerse you in the story of his life exactly as it happened.
Then in part 2, we'll shift gears. We'll pause the narrative, take a breath, and do a thematic breakdown.
We'll unpack the how and the why behind all these events. We'll examine the psychological machinery that Fisac identified in his writings.
But before we jump into Madrid in 1935, we really need to do a quick tone check.
Yeah, this is important.
The sources we're drawing from today are serious. They deal with profound spiritual and psychological distress.
And our approach here is going to be precise and compassionate. We want to make it incredibly clear to you, the listener, that our goal is not to attack or belittle ordinary, sincere members of this organization.
Not at all. Fisac himself noted repeatedly in his writings that the vast majority of people who join do so with incredible generosity.
Right, with pure hearts and a genuine desire to do good.
Exactly. Our focus today is entirely on examining the institutional structures of power, control, and authority. And we are doing that completely through the lens of one of its earliest survivors, using only the sources provided.
It's a crucial distinction. We're looking at the machinery of an institution, not condemning the individuals caught in its gears. Also, regarding any politically charged historical content, like the Spanish Civil War, we are just impartially reporting the historical context from the sources. We aren't taking any sides.
Right. We are just conveying the ideas and events contained in Fisac's original material.
Okay, let's begin part 1. We are setting the scene in Madrid. The year is 1935.
This is the era of the Spanish Second Republic.
Now, for those who might not know the history, this is a time of extreme, almost unbearable political and religious tension.
The atmosphere is basically an absolute powder keg.
Yeah. There is active, violent religious persecution happening across the country. Churches are being burned, and religious figures are being targeted.
And in response to all this chaos, young Catholics are feeling a profound, desperate need for spiritual renewal.
They're looking for something authentic to hold on to.
Right, exactly. And into this highly charged terrifying environment steps a 21-year-old architecture student.
Miguel Fisac.
Yes, Miguel Fisac. He's from the rural town of Daimiel in the region of La Mancha.
And he's just returned to Madrid after witnessing a deeply disturbing Holy Week in his hometown.
Right, he actually saw religious processions being fired upon in the streets.
Which is horrifying. So he is deeply shaken by this. He's young, he's anxious, and he is desperately looking for spiritual grounding in a world that feels like it's coming apart.
And right at this vulnerable moment, a classmate of his approaches him, a fellow architecture student named Pedro Casciaro.
And Pedro tells Miguel about this really fascinating young priest he met, and he wants Miguel to meet him.
So Pedro takes Miguel to a place called the DYA residence. DYA, it's on Ferraz Street, number 50.
Now, officially on the plaque outside, DYA stood for Derecho y Arquitecture. Law and architecture.
Right, so to the outside world, it just operated like a normal, prestigious student residence.
But secretly, among those in the know, DYA stood for Dios y Audacia, God and Audacity.
And this unassuming residence was the nascent early center of Opus Dei.
So Miguel goes in, and he is introduced to this charismatic, highly engaging young priest named Josemaría Escrivá.
And initially, Miguel really likes him.
He does. The environment in the residence is warm, it's friendly, it's filled with cultured, highly educated young men.
They're all talking about living the radical fraternity of the early Christians. It feels like a safe harbor from the chaos outside.
Miguel is drawn to the energy, but he is very clear in his own mind. He just wants to help out.
Right, he has absolutely no desire to join any kind of formal organization or commit his life to anything.
He just wants to volunteer his artistic talents. So they ask him to paint a massive mural for the main dining room.
And this is a big project. Day after day, Miguel stands before this enormous canvas, like 1.5 by 2 meters, meticulously painting a serene forest scene with large deer.
And as he paints, for hours on end, Escrivá pulls up a chair and sits right beside him.
Just sitting there, talking to him, it's a slow, methodical process of building immense trust.
Escrivá is highly skilled at reading people, and he is subtly extracting deeply personal details from Miguel.
Yeah, the organization uses what they call affiliation sheet.
What exactly is that?
Think of it as a detailed psychological and demographic dossier. It maps out a person's background, their parents' wealth, their academic studies, their fears.
Even their hobbies and sports, right?
Exactly. And Miguel openly shares his life. He lists his passions like painting, music, and skiing.
So Escrivá uses this growing intimacy to plant a very specific seed. He tells Miguel, supposedly as a sign of great personal confidence, about his divine vision for this new work.
And then he leans in and tells Miguel to pray to the Archangel Gabriel.
To find a beautiful rich girl to marry.
Right. Or, Escrivá adds with a pause, in case the Lord asks for more.
And Miguel immediately feels a massive spike of anxiety.
Because Miguel's what's known in Catholic terminology as a highly scrupulous young man.
Right, scrupulosity. It's essentially a form of religious obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's this paralyzing constant fear that you are committing a sin or failing God.
So Miguel tells Escrivá he's terrified. He says he doesn't want to get involved, that he just wants a normal life.
But Escrivá immediately shifts into a comforting role. He reassures him. He tells Miguel not to worry at all, promising that he personally will act as his spiritual director and help him overcome this crippling scrupulosity.
But behind the scenes, the pressure is mounting exponentially.
Yeah, his close friends, Pedro Casciaro and another student named Francisco or Paco Botella, have both officially joined the group.
And they begin relentlessly, daily, pressuring Miguel to do the same.
Then the trap suddenly springs, and it happens around a truly bizarre coincidence.
Out of nowhere, Miguel's older brother wins the lottery.
And not just a small prize. He wins the first prize in the national lottery.
A staggering 100,000 pesetas.
Which was an absolute fortune at the time. So shortly after the news breaks, the phone rings. It's Pedro Casciaro.
And Pedro says Escrivá needs to see Miguel at the residence immediately.
So Miguel walks into the DYA residence filled with absolute dread.
He assumes very logically that because the residence is constantly struggling financially, Escrivá is going to use this meeting to ask him for a cut of his brother's lottery winnings.
Right. He braces himself for a financial shakedown. He is fully ready to say no to money.
He walks into Escrivá's office, he sits down, and Escrivá doesn't ask for a single peseta.
Instead, he looks dead into Miguel's eyes and says, "Miguel, I think you have a vocation."
The psychological whiplash is devastating.
It really is. The profound relief Miguel feels that it wasn't about the money completely disarms his defenses.
combined with his own scrupulous, terrifying fear of saying no to what is being framed as the voice of God.
And the intense peer pressure from his friends.
Miguel literally freezes. He cannot find the words or the courage to refuse.
So on February 29th, 1936, Miguel Fisac officially joins.
And he notes in his personal writings that from that very first day, the moment he agreed, he felt like he was suffocating in an absolute nightmare.
He instantly, desperately wanted out.
But he doesn't get out because history intervenes.
Right. Just months later, in July 1936, the Spanish Civil War erupts.
Society collapses. The members of the residents scatter for their lives.
Then Miguel flees the capital. He makes it back to Daimiel, and he spends an entire year hiding in the cramped, sweltering attic of his parents' house.
Terrified of being discovered and executed by militias.
During this terrifying year of isolation, Paco Botella manages to keep in touch with him.
And to avoid the intense suspicion of the censors and protect Miguel's location, Paco corresponds with Miguel's sister.
Yeah, they write letters back and forth pretending to be two female friends gossiping, hiding coded messages about the group's survival.
Finally, in October 1937, a rescue mission arrives.
Juan Jimenez Vargas, an early member acting as a military doctor, shows up in Daimiel with fake documents to smuggle Miguel out of the Republican zone.
And Miguel is incredibly moved by this. He thinks Jimenez Vargas is risking his life purely out of brotherly love to save him.
But it is only much later that Miguel pieces the grim reality together.
Right. The leadership of the group, who were hiding in Madrid, had decided that Escrivá needed to escape to the nationalist zone to survive and continue his work.
But crossing the Pyrenees mountains in the dead of winter required hiring highly specialized, ruthless smugglers.
And the guides demanded a massive sum of money up front.
None of the men hiding in Madrid had it, but they realized Miguel's father, back in Daimiel, might be able to pay.
So Miguel's extraction wasn't just a rescue mission.
It was a cold financial necessity for the survival of the founder. Miguel's father handed over 37,000 pesetas to fund the entire group's escape.
The group manages to converge in Barcelona. They spend a harrowing month hiding there without proper documents.
In extreme daily danger of being discovered, before finally beginning the grueling crossing of the Pyrenees into Andorra and eventually France.
The group consists of 8 men: Josemaría Escrivá, Paco Botella, Pedro Casciaro, Josemaría Albareda, Tomás Alvira, Juan Jimenez Vargas, Manuel Saiz de los Terreros, and Miguel Fisac.
And the journey is horrific. We are talking about men who are not mountaineers wearing inadequate clothing.
Facing freezing temperatures, severe physical exhaustion, and the constant gnawing terror of being caught by border patrols.
At one point deep in the mountains, they are forced to shelter in a tiny, abandoned stone bread oven in a freezing village called Rialp.
And the psychological tension that night reaches an absolute breaking point.
Escrivá completely breaks down. He spends the entire night weeping uncontrollably in the dark.
He claims he has committed a terrible, unforgivable betrayal by leaving his closest confidant, Álvaro de Portillo, behind in the lethal dangers of Madrid.
He declares to the men that he is turning back, that the mission is over.
Which sparks a violent confrontation in the freezing dark.
Yeah, Juan Jimenez Vargas, the military doctor, refuses to let the mission fail. He explicitly, physically threatens Escrivá.
He tells him he will knock him out and drag him by the hair to the other side of the border if he has to.
Escrivá, desperate and paralyzed by indecision, demands a supernatural sign from the Virgin Mary to prove he should continue.
He asks to find a rose blooming in the freezing dead winter of the Pyrenees.
The next morning, as the sun comes up, Escrivá walks out of the stone oven into the ruins of a burned-out hermitage nearby.
And there, amidst the ash and the rubble of a destroyed altarpiece, he spots a gilded, carved wooden rose.
Escrivá seizes upon this. He takes this as his undeniable divine sign to press on.
Years later, Miguel Fisac would see this exact wooden rose preserved like a holy relic in a glass vitrine in Escrivá's opulent private rooms in Rome.
Wow. So they survive the crossing. The group eventually makes it into the nationalist zone, arriving in the city of Burgos.
They take up residence at the modest Hotel Sabadell.
And here, another incredibly strange event occurs that Fisac would later be explicitly ordered to document as a miracle.
They learn that the father of Pedro Casciaro, who is a well-known, high-profile socialist from Albacete, is also in Burgos.
This is incredibly dangerous. Given the brutal political executions happening at the time, His presence threatens the safety of everyone.
So Escrivá decides he must go meet the father personally to ensure he doesn't draw any attention to Pedro, who is currently serving at the military front.
The meeting goes terribly. Escrivá returns to the hotel highly agitated, saying they argued furiously and it ended in disaster.
Later that afternoon, Escrivá is staring out the window of the hotel room, seemingly lost in thought, and he mutters aloud, "Tomorrow this man's son will die."
Miguel is stunned into absolute silence. To predict the death of a friend is horrifying.
Later that evening, they go for a tense walk through the streets of Burgos, and they see a freshly posted death notice glued to a wall.
It is the man Escrivá had just argued with. The father had died suddenly, not the son.
But Escrivá doesn't miss a beat. He quickly reframes the entire moment.
He claims his internal divine locution had actually been, tomorrow, burial. And he had merely misinterpreted the divine signal to mean the son at the front.
And he immediately orders Miguel and the others to write down this experience right then and there,
as undeniable, documented proof of his supernatural premonitions.
So the war finally ends. We move into a new era, the period spanning from 1939 to 1955.
This is an era of immense, almost unprecedented professional triumph for Miguel Fisac.
He becomes one of the most sought-after, innovative architects in Spain.
While other early members of the group are earning very modest salaries as academics or researchers, Fisac is bringing in massive, incredible wealth through high-profile commissions.
And according to the strict rules of the organization, because he is a celibate member, he hands every single cent of his massive earnings over to the directors.
Yet, despite essentially funding a massive portion of their early expansion and their real estate purchases, he is subjected to the deepest, most infantilizing humiliations.
Right. At the end of every single month, this world-renowned architect has to sit before his lay directors and justify the pennies he spent on his own bus tickets.
His soaring professional public success is a stark, jarring contrast to his private, internal hell.
His anxiety becomes severe. The daily schedule of a celibate member and numerary is suffocating.
It is an endless, rigid checklist designed to consume every waking minute.
A morning offering the second you wake up, a half hour of silent mental prayer, daily mass, communion, the Angelus at noon.
3 entire parts of the rosary, mandated spiritual reading, another half hour of mental prayer in the evening.
Visits to the sacrament and severe physical mortifications like wearing a spiked chain, a hair shirt around the thigh for 2 hours a day.
Miguel realizes that he is living in a state of constant, low-grade terror.
He is constantly stressed about missing a single prayer on his checklist, constantly worried about confessing his internal doubts.
But he realizes the structure never, ever asks him to reflect on actual outward charity.
Right. He realizes he is going to bed every night without ever asking, what have I actually done for my neighbor today?
Adding to this crushing internal torment is the constant looming threat of the priesthood.
Escrivá holds absolute arbitrary control over who in the group gets ordained. There is no seminary discernment process.
Escrivá literally points to men and says, "You a priest, you know."
Men who desperately feel a calling to the priesthood, like Vicente Rodríguez Casado and Fernando Valenciano, are flatly, inexplicably denied.
Others who feel intense dread at the prospect are coerced into it.
Escrivá knows Miguel's deep, visceral aversion to becoming a priest and repeatedly promises him he will never force him to be ordained.
But the psychological manipulation doesn't stop. Years later, Escrivá tries a different tactic.
He tries to force Miguel to become the sole lay member of the Priestly Society of the Holy Cross, a new internal structure.
Miguel is summoned abruptly from a rare Sunday lunch with his aging parents.
He arrives, anxious. He listens to the demand. He looks at Escrivá and asks, simply, "Can I say no?"
Escrivá, caught off guard, says yes.
Miguel flatly says, "Then no," and walks out of the room.
That evening, Álvaro del Portillo pulls Miguel aside into a hallway and says, "You've given the Father a terrible displeasure."
The guilt is weaponized, the golden handcuffs are tightening, but Miguel is finally, agonizingly, reaching his breaking point.
We finally arrive at 1955. After 20 years of internal screaming,
20 years of desperately wanting to leave since the very day he joined.
Miguel demands his exit. He is in Madrid, and Escrivá is residing in Rome.
Miguel is told he cannot just leave. He must fly to Rome to handle it personally with the founder.
So Miguel boards a plane to Rome in September 1955, but Escrivá refuses to deal with it directly.
He won't even look at him. He passes Miguel off to Álvaro del Portillo.
For 2 agonizing days, Portillo tries absolutely everything to keep him. He argues, he pleads.
He even tries a bizarre last-ditch guilt trip, asking Miguel to just stay long enough to drive Escrivá to Vienna because it would make the father so happy.
Miguel stands firm. His clarity has finally crystallized. I have to go to Madrid, he says.
And then a truly stunning admission occurs. Portillo, realizing he is lost, looks at Miguel and says, "Miguel, I want to ask your forgiveness for the coercion we have subjected you to so you wouldn't leave, but you acted so generously all these years we thought you had a vocation."
Portillo admits the coercion, but Escrivá's reaction is entirely different, and it sets the stage for everything that follows.
He refuses to see Miguel off. Instead, he writes a letter to Miguel's confessor, Paco Botella.
The same man who wrote to Miguel's sister during the war.
Right, and he includes strict instructions that the letter be read aloud to Miguel.
The letter says, "I'm very sorry Miguel wants to leave because he is going to suffer a lot and will be a wretch."
It isn't a farewell, it is a curse disguised as a prophecy.
On September 30th, 1955, Miguel Fisac walks out of the Diego de Leon residence for the very last time.
He carries only a tiny suitcase. He has absolutely no money in his pocket, having given them his entire fortune.
He walks through the streets of Madrid toward his parents' house, making a silent, solemn vow to himself.
"Miguel, from now on, you will always tell the truth, and you will be a good man. Just love others, nothing more."
He is free, but the institution was not done with him.
Which brings us to the chilling aftermath of his life, spanning from 1955 all the way to 1999.
Against all the prophecies of doom, Miguel actually finds incredible, profound happiness.
He meets a vibrant woman named Ana Maria, who knows absolutely nothing about his past or Opus Dei.
They fall in love. They marry in 1957. They begin building a beautiful family.
Escrivá occasionally writes Miguel letters during these early years, but the letters are terrifying in their deliberate omissions.
Escrivá pointedly refuses to ever acknowledge the existence of Miguel's wife or his growing children.
The institution simply cannot accept that Miguel is happy, because if he is happy, he is not the wretch Escrivá prophesied.
His happiness is an existential threat to their narrative.
The corporate shunning begins almost immediately. Miguel asks two of his oldest friends, numeraries in the group, to be witnesses at his wedding.
They enthusiastically agree. But the day before the wedding, they suddenly back out, claiming coldly that it isn't the custom.
Miguel's own sister, who is an Opus Dei member, is explicitly barred by her directors from attending his wedding.
But the cruelty reaches its absolute, unimaginable nadir some years later.
Miguel's beautiful 6.5-year-old daughter tragically dies from a severe reaction to a polio vaccine.
It is the kind of unimaginable loss that breaks a human being. On the agonizing day of her funeral, 2 Opus Dei priests arrive at his home.
One of them is his former confessor, Paco Botella.
Let's slow down here and picture this. A father is burying his 6-year-old child. These men, whom he lived with for 20 years, walk into his home.
But they don't come to offer comfort. They don't offer to pray with him.
Instead, they stand in the room making strange, horrified gestures.
They lean in and whisper to Miguel, heavily implying that his little girl's death is a direct punishment from God because he abandoned the organization.
Miguel is so utterly repulsed, so deeply sickened by this spiritual abuse, that he goes to his study and tears up every single letter he ever received from them.
The retribution doesn't stay confined to the spiritual realm. It extends aggressively into his architectural career.
Miguel begins to notice a quiet, systemic, incredibly effective boycott. Wealthy clients suddenly drop him without explanation.
Massive public projects dry up. Every time he investigates the severed contracts, he finds a connection to an Opus Dei member behind the scenes.
By 1977, he decides he's had enough. He compiles a meticulously documented list of these sabotages and takes the evidence straight to the Vatican.
To Bishop Maximino Romero de Lema.
The bishop reads the evidence, is deeply disturbed, and tells Miguel to call Alvaro del Portillo immediately from his office.
Miguel makes the call, and Portillo demands he come over right away.
Portillo reviews the hard evidence, admits the reality of the persecution, and tells Miguel, "Go in peace. I will give the order that you are not persecuted."
The explicit persecution may have paused, but the erasure of his legacy continues decades later.
In the 1990s, the official beatification process to make Josemaría Escrivá a saint begins in the Catholic Church.
Miguel, feeling a deep moral obligation to historical truth, officially offers to testify before the tribunal about the deeply flawed human Escrivá he actually knew and lived with for 20 years.
The tribunal, led by a man named Javier Echevarria, aggressively blocks Miguel from testifying. They refuse to hear him.
And we know exactly how they managed to block him because secret Vatican files were later leaked to the Spanish newspaper El País.
The leaked files reveal that Josemaría swore under oath that Miguel Fisac was a psychologically unbalanced man suffering from obsessive megalomania and bad morals, who only left because the ascetic rules were simply too hard for him.
Fisac, realizing the historical record is being rigged, refuses to be silenced.
He takes the extraordinary step of going on national television on the highly respected intellectual Spanish talk show Le Clave to tell his unvarnished truth to all of Spain.
And the final blow, the ultimate attempt at erasure, comes in 1999.
One of Fisac's most iconic, beloved buildings in Madrid, affectionately known by the public as La Pagoda, is purchased by new corporate owners.
The new owners publicly state they love the building. They even announce plans to rename it the Miguel Fisac Building and install a commemorative plaque honoring his genius.
Within weeks of that public announcement, municipal authorities suddenly demand the building's total demolition, claiming it is necessary to grant new zoning permits.
The building is rapidly, almost frantically torn down before preservationists can stop it.
Fisac implies heavily in his private letters that this sudden destruction was orchestrated by municipal influences tied to the group.
A final, brutal attempt to literally erase his legacy from the skyline of Madrid.
But Fisac watches his masterpiece fall into rubble with total, profound peace. He writes that if the destruction of La Pagoda serves to illuminate the truth of how this organization operates, then blessed be it. Let's explicitly pause the narrative right here. I want to take a breath.
Yeah, that is a lot to process.
What we have just walked through is an immense, almost suffocating emotional weight. To give 20 years of your prime youth, your entire personal fortune, your architectural genius to an organization, only to endure that kind of chilling, coordinated aftermath, it is profound.
It is a heavy story, deeply unsettling, and it requires us to look far beyond just the sequence of biographical events. We need to look at the mechanics of what just happened.
Exactly. Now that we have heard the chronological story of Fisac's life, we need to unpack the why and the how. Fisac didn't just leave us a memoir of his pain. He left a rigorous, almost architectural breakdown of the institution's psychology.
This brings us to part 2, the thematic analysis.
Fisac's critique is brilliantly methodical. He identified how the system functioned at its core.
He noted that the entire foundation of the group rested on an unexplained, highly guarded mystical vision that Escrivá claimed to have had in 1928, and later a divine locution in 1931.
But here is the critical part of Fisac's analysis. Because this founding vision was never clearly defined, never published in detail, and never subjected to external theological scrutiny by the wider church, Escrivá could use it as a perpetual blank check.
A blank check? That's such a perfect way to describe it.
It's like having an unauditable ledger in a massive corporation. If the CEO stands up and says, "The financial numbers are perfect, God told me they're perfect, but no one is ever allowed to look at the books," you have absolute unchecked power.
Fisac used this brilliant analogy in his writings. He said Escrivá played with 2 decks of cards, the human deck and the supernatural deck.
Right. Fisac noted that most of the time Escrivá played with the human deck. He was a man with flaws, a temper, preferences.
But if Escrivá had a sudden temper tantrum at dinner, or demanded a seemingly arbitrary, harsh rule, or demanded that the domestic maids cook an omelet 5 times in a row just to test their patience, he immediately played the supernatural card.
He framed his human whims, his anger, or his preferences as direct divine will or necessary ascetic training for his followers.
But think about the psychological impact of that on a follower. If every human whim, every mood swing of a leader is shielded by an unquestionable divine mandate, how can a follower ever trust their own conscience?
If the leader's anger is framed as God's anger, you are completely paralyzed. You can never disagree without feeling like you are disagreeing with the Almighty.
You are paralyzed. And that paralysis is maintained by substituting true faith with rigid piety.
Fisac made a profound theological critique of what he lived for 2 decades. He stated that the organization effectively substituted actual living faith with regimented, measurable piety.
It's all about checking off boxes, right?
Yes. They were obsessed with checking off ascetic boxes. The daily norms were relentless. Multiple rosaries, sleeping on the hard floor with a wooden book for a pillow, wearing hair shirts that dig into the flesh, taking freezing cold showers.
But Fisac, looking back, realized that this entire intense system was entirely devoid of actual outward-facing charity.
He explicitly said you could perfectly complete your daily checklist of spiritual norms. You could be the absolute perfect numerary on paper, while entirely completely ignoring the suffering of your actual neighbor.
The system never asked, who did you help today? It only asked, did you finish your mental prayer on time?
It's a self-contained, closed loop of personal holiness that literally doesn't require loving anyone else in the real world.
And that self-contained loop is ruthlessly enforced through a mechanism Fisac called holy coercion and holy intransigence.
Fisac explicitly warned that the beatification of Escrivá would indirectly canonize these two distinct human vices.
Escrivá always maintained in public that members stay purely because they feel like it, because they are completely free.
Hold on, I'm struggling to understand something here, and I want to push back a bit. We are talking about Miguel Fisac. He was a highly educated, brilliant, immensely wealthy architect.
Right.
He was moving in the absolute elite circles of Madrid society. He wasn't locked in a basement compound in the woods. He had a career. He had resources. If he was in such agony every day, why didn't he just walk out the front door?
It's the most common question, and it's answered by understanding the mechanism of soft coercion.
Soft coercion.
Soft coercion is vastly more powerful than physical locks on a door. Soft coercion works by reframing reality. It frames your departure not as a simple change of career or a shift in your personal philosophy, but as a direct, literal betrayal of God.
They weaponize the victim's own moral scrupulosity.
They tell you repeatedly from the time you are young that you have a specific divine vocation, and to turn away from it is to invite eternal damnation. You aren't kept in the residence by physical walls. You are kept in by the sheer terror of your own conscience.
That makes total sense. They build the prison inside your own mind. And how do they maintain that terror? Through an absolute monopoly on the soul. Fisac highlighted the strict internal rule: wash your dirty laundry at home.
Members were strictly, unequivocally forbidden from confessing to outside priests. You had to confess to an Opus Dei priest, and you had to lay bare your entire soul, your every thought, in the weekly confidence with your lay director.
Think about the absolute psychological isolation of that rule. By making the institution the sole director of your daily actions, the ultimate judge of your morality, and the only authorized confessor of your sins, you have zero external sounding board.
If Fisac went to a normal parish priest outside the group and said, I think this is wrong, I'm miserable, the priest might have said, you're right, this is unhealthy, leave.
By deliberately cutting off the outside world, the institution completely controls the definition of reality.
And they controlled the material reality just as tightly as the spiritual one. Fisac highlights how the group absorbed total autonomy, particularly regarding money and work.
Here is a man generating immense, incredible wealth through his architectural commissions, yet he is rendered completely financially dependent.
He gave them everything, literally every paycheck. And the human cost of that systemic institutional greed was devastating to him.
He tells that heartbreaking story of a childhood friend who came to him in desperate financial ruin, practically begging for a small loan to save his family from disaster.
Fisac had the money. He earned the money. But because of the rules, he had to ask his director for permission to use it.
And his director explicitly forbade him from helping his childhood friend, stating coldly that the spirit of the work didn't allow it.
The rule was clear. All resources, all wealth must flow inward to expand the institution, never outward to the truly needy in the world.
That story really reminds me of Fisac's sharp observation about schools. He noted that Escrivá used to openly, mockingly criticize traditional Catholic religious orders.
Escrivá would say they started out humbly serving the poor and inevitably ended up running elite schools for rich kids.
Yet, Fisac notes with bitter irony, this is exactly what Opus Dei did almost immediately. He witnessed the creation of the Gastelleta school in Bilbao. They prioritized proximity to wealth, aristocracy, and power over absolutely everything else.
That relentless pursuit of wealth and status connects directly to Escrivá's own background. Fisac traced Escrivá's obsession with aristocratic power back to a deep childhood trauma.
Escrivá's father suffered a very public, humiliating business bankruptcy in the town of Barbastro.
Fisac, having observed him for 2 decades, believed this embedded a deep, unhealed inferiority complex in Escrivá.
And we see it manifest in an absolute obsession with status. Escrivá literally altered his family name. He added de Balaguer to sound more aristocratic because he openly admitted he hated the slight look of disappointment on the faces of nobles when they heard the plain common name Escrivá.
He went so far as to legally purchase the aristocratic title of the Marquis of Peralta.
He demanded silver tableware for his meals, he stayed in luxury hotels during his travels, and he demanded that the female members acting as domestic servants wear starched uniforms and caps.
Fisac points out the glaring, irreconcilable hypocrisy. Escrivá demanded medieval asceticism, painful hair shirts, and sleeping on the floor for the members, but absolute opulence for the institution's public image and for himself.
Escrivá literally coined a phrase for it, saying that when fishing for members, you have to catch fish by the head, meaning specifically target the elites, the intellectuals, and the wealthy.
But here's the thing about power. Once you have it, you have to protect it at all costs, and that requires the manipulation of institutional memory.
Authoritarian systems always, inevitably, rewrite their own history to maintain the myth of perfection. Fisac gives us a highly tangible, provable example.
During that horrific Pyrenees crossing during the war, there were exactly 8 men. We listed their names earlier. Fisac was there.
But because Fisac and Manuel Salles later defected from the organization, the official published biographies literally erased them. The official approved history claimed there were only 6 men on that heroic crossing.
It's like Soviet-style photo airbrushing. If you leave, you never existed.
And it went far beyond simple erasure. The leadership aggressively bought up the physical ruins in Rialp to build a massive physical mythology around the wooden rose, turning it into a lucrative shrine.
And at the exact same time, they were actively doctoring Vatican documents. Javier Echevarria swearing under oath that Fisac was crazy and had bad morals wasn't just a petty insult. It was a highly calculated legal maneuver to systematically suppress his eyewitness testimony and protect the pristine myth of the founder from any historical scrutiny.
Which brings us to perhaps the most chilling observation of all, the treatment of those who leave.
To the institution, anyone who leaves must be framed as a catastrophic failure. The system's claim to perfection demands that if there is a fracture, the fault must lie entirely, completely with the defector.
We saw with Escrivá literally cursing Fisac. He is going to suffer a lot and will be a wretch. When Fisac defied that curse and actually found joy and love with Anna Maria, they couldn't process it.
They ignored his marriage. They pretended his children didn't exist.
And when his 6-year-old daughter died, they weaponized the tragedy. Those 2 priests whispering that the death of a child was a punishment from God. It is the desperate behavior of a system that needs you to be broken if you are not with them.
Your survival outside the walls threatens the walls themselves. Fisac didn't mince words in his later writings. He called the corporate shunning, the wedding boycotts, and the professional sabotage the exact behavior of a sect or a mafia.
Yet, despite enduring all of this, the abuse, the sabotage, the cruelty, we arrive at the most remarkable part of Fisac's testimony. It's the difference between criticizing the system and respecting the sincere.
This is what makes Fisac's testimony so incredibly credible and so moving. He never lost his humanity. He never became consumed by a blind, scorching hatred.
He didn't. He repeatedly stated, until the end of his life, that he loved the men he lived with. He recognized clearly that most members, especially the young people who joined, did so with pure, generous hearts.
They genuinely wanted to serve God and make the world a better place.
His critique was laser-focused entirely on the machine. He hated the structure of power that consumed that youthful generosity, metabolized it, and used it purely for its own endless expansion and influence.
He managed to separate the victims from the architecture that held them captive.
He has a profound level of emotional intelligence. To survive that kind of prolonged spiritual and psychological abuse and still hold a space of love for the people who are still trapped inside it, that requires immense grace.
As we wrap up this exploration today, there's a final thought that really lingers for me. When you look at the entirety of Miguel Fisac's life, what was his greatest achievement?
You could easily say it was the prestigious gold medal he won in Vienna in 1954. You could say it was the Center for Hydrographic Studies, or his incredible, sweeping, gravity-defying concrete churches that still stand today.
But reading his deeply personal testimony, you realize his true masterpiece wasn't made of concrete or glass. His true masterpiece was the reclamation of his own mind.
The institution tried to erase his history. They tried to tear down his buildings, and in the case of La Pagoda, they succeeded in turning it to dust.
But Fisac realized that the truth is the only thing that actually restores our voice, our freedom, and our adulthood.
He left that residence on Diego de Leon Street with absolutely nothing but a small suitcase. He had no money, no career guarantees, and a terrifying curse hanging over his head. But he left whole.
He walked out into the Madrid air, made a quiet vow to himself to just tell the truth and be a good man, and he spent the next 50 years doing exactly that. They tried to erase him, but he outlasted the lies.
He left us a blueprint, not just for building beautiful structures, but for how to understand and dismantle the architecture of coercion.
It's an incredible legacy.
If Miguel Fisac's incredible story resonated with you, help us ensure these silent stories continue to be heard. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this conversation. Support the channel so we can keep bringing these vital hidden testimonies out of the shadows and into the light. Thank you for listening to Episode 8.
My blessings on the center line. Count my losses in the passing pines. If every wrong turn still somehow led me here to you, guess I can't complain when I look back through this back road real view. First scar on my knuckle from a fight that